Hey everyone. So you're wondering where my friend Mike Lindell is? Well, guess what? He was actually creating the My Slipper. It's like walking on clouds, right? Don't forget to use the promo code Carter, Carter, and you will receive 40% off of your My Slippers. Your whole family's going to love it. Today's podcast is sponsored by the Association of Mature American Citizens, the fastest growing conservative 50-plus organization in America. Join today at amac.us/Carter. Remember, that's amac.us/Carter. Great organization. Wow, do we have so much to talk about? So I was literally in Texas and, covering CPAC as well as the border. And we know that that is an ongoing crisis and situation. Then I also was in Miami, very excited to be in Miami with so many Cuban Americans that were standing up for freedom and liberty and basically chanting, if my brothers and sisters are out in the streets of Cuba putting their lives on the line, then we're out here on the streets of Miami doing the same for them, saying that we are there to support them and to stand by them as they fight for liberty and freedom in a dictatorship, a communist dictatorship that has stolen the lives of so many people. I want you to think about that, because what I'm going to be talking about today in the podcast, and by the way, we have the ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee and a hero in my book that helped expose everything that happened with the Russia hoax, somebody who I have great admiration for. We have ranking member Congressman Devin Nunes from California, and that's Nunes, not Nunez. He'll let you know that. It's different. He's Portuguese, so it's Nunes. I had to learn that myself. I thought I'd just give you guys a little lesson here. Nunes, not Nunez. He will be joining me, and we're going to be talking about the National Security Agency and what happened with my Fox colleague, Tucker Carlson, and the implications of that, of the allegations that the NSA, which they did, was spying on Tucker Carlson's communications. How many more of us have been exposed to that? And I believe quite a few of us have. And I'm going to talk to you about that in the show, including yours truly, as well as others. And some of that was exposed in the Russia report that was done by Horowitz. You could just look at it yourself, as well as the Mueller report, where there was some evidence and information that the FBI had been looking into communications of Sean Hannity and others. I mean, this is really important, guys. It's important for us to understand that we are living in the United States of America. We have a constitution that forbids the government from intruding on our Fourth Amendment rights. That's our right to privacy. Unless they have a warrant, unless they have a reason to believe that we've broken the law, the government is forbidden from doing that. Why? Because throughout history, governments that obtain that kind of power and are able to intrude on your private life and able to control the populace change. They're no longer democracies. They're dictatorships. They're communist governments. They're tyrannical. This is why we cannot accept this. This is why we cannot allow this to happen. Okay, I need you all to please follow and subscribe to my email list, okay? And you can get all those links at saracarter.com. That's saracarter.com. And while you are there, I want you to please sign up again for our email list. Get on all of our social media. We're at Rumble, YouTube. Hopefully I don't look like I'm a Benny Hill montage from the 80s. Apparently my producers are complaining about the bad Wi-Fi connection I have at home right now. So I got to call Xfinity and get that taken care of right away. They were really frustrating me today with that. Not my producers, but Xfinity. So I'm going to have to take care of that. So remember, go to saracarter.com, saracarter.com, where you can get on our email list and we can get those emails to you so that you do not get shadow banned. And that's what we're going to be talking about today too. NSA, what it means to have freedom of speech, our First Amendment rights to speak up, to be who we are without fear of the government, right? And why President Trump is heading that class action lawsuit against Twitter, Google, and Facebook. Why we should all join that class action lawsuit if you believe if you believe that you have been shadow banned or if you've been shut down just because of your thoughts or your ideas that are not breaking the law, I'm not talking about criminal behavior. I'm talking about simple things like you think the election was stolen or President Trump is the greatest president you have ever known. Okay, then you're shadow banned, right, from Twitter. Or like President Trump, he's been eliminated altogether from Facebook. So those are things that we really want to focus on. I want to talk about the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. And this harkens me back, right, to some of the very first stories that I actually wrote with John Solomon, my former colleague at Sinclair and Circa. And this was all about how during the Obama administration, the National Security Agency intentionally and routinely, this is not just me saying this, intercepted and reviewed communications of American citizens in violation of the Constitution. They did that. And how do we know that? Because the FISA court exposed it. Because the FISA court chided the Obama administration in a declassified document, that said, hey, wait a minute. This is unacceptable. I'm going to read you a piece here. This is actually a couple of paragraphs that Andrew McCarthy wrote way back when John Solomon and I were breaking these stories. And I love Andrew McCarthy. He's a great litigator, an amazing American and patriot. And this is what he wrote. The story was explosive revelation of the Obama administration's illegal surveillance of Americans. I'm just trying to refresh all your memories. This was when the administration began stonewalling about the scope of the violation that exasperated the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, that it literally accused the NSA of an institutional lack of candor in connection with what the court described as a very serious Fourth Amendment issue. I'm telling you that Tucker Carlson is not making this stuff up. And if the media is trying to convolute it, and if there are Republicans out there that want to poo-poo him or act like, oh, you're just making this stuff up, it's the furthest thing from the truth. What Tucker Carlson is saying was happening and is happening to this present day. Because why? Because there's no oversight. Because there's nobody to stop anyone from doing this. Who's in charge? Oh, okay, we're going to talk to Devin Nunes about this because this is the most difficult part. Congress has tried. The DOJ, what are they doing? Nothing. They did nothing under President Trump when everything was exposed. Okay, so a bunch of people got fired. A bunch of people got exposed, but it was up to the Department of Justice to put people in jail for violating the law, for basically weaponizing our FBI, weaponizing our NSA, weaponizing our CIA, just weaponizing the whole shebang, right? Because information is power. And when we give up our information, when the government is able to access our information, we lose our freedom. I want you to think about that. The FISA court opinion was actually very public. It was declassified. And the unlawful surveillance, as stated by Andrew McCarthy here, was first exposed by John Solomon and I when we were working for Circa at Sinclair, and we had gotten access to these internal classified reports. The story was also followed up by James Rosen and Bret Baier on Fox News' special report. I want you to remember that. According to these internal reports that I reviewed personally, the illegal surveillance involved more than 5% of NSA searches of databases derived from what is called upstream collection of internet communications. They were gathering everything, but they could pull back and bring back anything they wanted as well. It's like sending out a big wide net and just gathering everyone's information, our phone calls, our emails, our communications. Then what they do is they go backwards, right? Like in search of a crime, like kind of what they're doing to President Trump right now. They just throw out their fishing hook, but they know exactly who they're going to catch. No, it's not terrorists. No, it's not this or that. I can tell you this because I've talked to people, very senior people in the intelligence community. They just go backwards. I want to get some information. I want to find out who Sarah Carter's talking to. Maybe I can get a warrant on her. Why? Because she has sources in, other parts of the world, maybe in South Asia. Maybe some of those sources have connections to the Taliban, or maybe she reached out to the Taliban for comment. Either way, I want to get information from her. Should be the hardest thing in the world is to get communications and intercept actual communications of a journalist or a priest or a doctor or a lawyer. But guess what? Under the Obama administration, they expanded that. They expanded that so that they could obtain those documents and that information. And I want you to think about that. What does that mean? Who can they control? I mean, if you have access, I'm just off the top of my head, right? Just off the top of my head. Imagine if you could see the communications of federal judges, right? Or, lawyers in Washington, D.C., or lobbyists or congressional members. If you had their communications, what if you found out, well, one of them's having an affair? What if you find out, oh, one of them's actually, gay? What if you find out that one of them may be breaking the law or committing some kind of criminal act because you have access to these communications? What do you think happens in a communist country? What do you think happens in nations where they have access to people's communication? You think they do it out of the goodness of their heart, that they research this and then they put people in jail, or they don't say anything because they don't want to disrupt a family? Or do you think they use it for blackmail? I'm not scared. I'm standing up to this. I'm telling you why. Because there's no doubt that at certain points in time, I was very afraid that our communications were being intercepted by people in the FBI, maybe by people in our intelligence community. It's not easy to prove, but I was pretty sure it was. And now you got to think about this. What do they do with that? And I'm a journalist, right? Or I was a journalist. Now I'm more of a columnist. I'm a podcaster. I'm on Sean Hannity covering stories. What do they know about me? Why are they collecting this information? Why do I have to live in the United States of America under this type of fear? Right? And I want you to think about, let me just play this clip. This is Tucker Carlson on the NSA leaking his emails to the public.
I'm an American citizen. I can interview anyone I want, and I plan to. But still, in this case, I decided to keep it quiet. I figured that any kind of publicity would rattle the Russians and make the interview less likely to happen. But the Biden administration found out anyway by reading my emails. I learned from a whistleblower that the NSA planned to leak the contents of those emails to media outlets. Why would they do that? Well, the point, of course, was to paint me as a disloyal American, a Russian operative, been called that before, a stooge of the Kremlin, a traitor doing the bidding of a foreign adversary.
Think about that. That's what they were going to do. You wanted me to tell you what that is called? Let's just expose the intelligence community now because they're actually targeting Americans. That's called a disinformation campaign. It was the same type of disinformation campaign that was pushed extensively, yes, by former CIA Director John Brennan, by James Clapper, who headed the NSA, and by James Comey, the former head director of the FBI, against the President of the United States of America. I want you to think about that. People are actually trained to do this in the intelligence community. They are actually trained to basically investigate and figure out how they are going to use information against either an opposing force, a nation, an enemy state, or a group of people. That's what they do. And they're trained to do it. And that's why when I started investigating the Russia hoax, and when I started seeing all these stories come out about Michael Flynn, who I knew since he was the J2 at the Pentagon and in Afghanistan, and his great patriotism and love for this nation, when I saw these stories come out and when I saw what they were doing to President Trump, I thought to myself, what the heck is going on here? And now they want to make Tucker Carlson look like he's a Russian stooge. I want you to think about this. Somebody at the NSA literally took Tucker's communications, right? Setting up an interview, and then just handed these communications over to, or were planning to, I bet you they already did, to a news agency in Washington, D.C. to run a disinformation campaign against a United States citizen. Against a United States citizen. I want just wrap your head around that. That's what the Russians do. That's what the Cubans do. That's why my Cuban relatives and my mother, who came here on the Johnson Freedom Flight with her one little bag in her hand, and with my grandmother and her brothers and sisters, left their country, literally walked away, right? Literally walked away for a better country, for this nation, for this nation. And I want you to think about what was exposed. Not only did we expose the fact, whoever leaked this whistleblower, which thank God, I think it was definitely needed to be in the public square, expose this, but now the Russians know who we're monitoring. Think about that. Think about that. That's how screwed up that these people that are working these disinformation campaigns, trying to target American citizens that are standing up for freedom and liberty. And by the way, calling anybody who does a radical. Yes, Biden administration, that's what you're doing. Just now, because of all of this, basically exposed to the Russian government exactly who they are monitoring. So what do you think Vladimir Putin's team and the FSB, which is now it's the KGB, right, is doing? Oh, they're changing everything. They're checking the servers. They're checking people. They want to know who their assets are. Everything's just up in the air right now. Everything's crazy, right? And they know that the United States has now turned on her own constitution. I think that's far worse. The Russians now know who we are watching. And we've exposed our surveillance of Putin's communications team. That's what we did. That's why I am going to have, in a few minutes, Congressman Devin Nunes come on here. I want to talk to him about this. I want him to understand what is happening and how I feel as an American about this. I truly believe that we are at a point in time in our nation that we, as Americans, need to stand up and speak up. Look, this is not just about Cuba, right? And the people marching in the streets in Cuba. This is about us not ever turning into Cuba. We want to protect our children, our Constitution, our Declaration of Independence. We want to be able to do the right thing. And I'm not saying, I'm saying what we need to do is just speak up. We can't be the silent majority anymore, guys. We can't just be quiet. We can't be worried. Okay, guess what? Some of us may lose some friends. Some of us may not, you don't go to work and be agreeable with everything everybody's saying. Don't go to work and be like, oh, everybody here's a liberal, or I don't even like to use the word liberal. I say leftist. Everybody here's a leftist, so I better just keep my mouth shut and, play the game. That's what happened in Cuba. And even when, and by the way, I have an incredible guest that's coming on this week as well on the podcast, Felix Rodriguez. I'm going to fill you all in on that, but he's in his 80s now. He served as a CIA paramilitary officer. He's a Cuban American, and he's going to give you the inside story into Che Guevara and everything. I mean, this guy was there. He saw it with his own eyes. He was at the Bay of Pigs. He knows what happened, and he is history walking. You're going to hear the real story from him on our show. But before I get to Congressman Nunes, I want to tell you about an organization that I absolutely believe in. Another organization that I am so grateful sponsors this podcast, and it's Tunnel to Towers Foundation. It honors our military and first responders who continue to make the supreme sacrifice of life and limb for our country, much like my husband Marty did. This is an organization that believes in our troops, that believes in our first responders, our law enforcement officials. And get this, to mark the 20 years since 9/11, the Tunnel to Towers Foundation is actually giving 200 mortgage-free homes to Gold Star and fallen first responder families with young children, as well as catastrophically injured veterans and first responders. You can't ask for more. In a moving tribute to the fallen, the foundation's chairman and CEO, Frank Siller, walks for the month of August through September 11th from the Pentagon to Shanksville, Pennsylvania, and then on to Ground Zero. We are going to be there. My family is going to be there with him at Ground Zero. That's what we plan on doing. Help this nation to never forget its greatest heroes. Do good in their honor. Donate $11 a month to Tunnel to Towers at t2t.org. $11 a month, guys. That is nothing really for the amount of good that this organization does. That's t2t.org. You won't regret it. You'll change someone's life. First of all, thank you so much, Congressman Nunes, for joining us today here at the Sarah Carter Show. Because, well, first of all, let me just set the stage so everybody knows. I just saw the congressman. I hadn't seen him in so long. Of course, COVID has kept us all separated, but we were lucky enough to run into each other at CPAC. I thought what you were doing at CPAC was phenomenal. I love Julio Rojas. He is a friend of mine. By the way, every one of you out there needs to read Julio's stories on the border. They're fantastic. He's a wonderful young journalist who's really making a big name for himself. And so thank you for all you do, Congressman, and thank you for doing your job, for actually caring about our security and our nation's security.
Well, the good thing about CPAC, Sarah, it was great to see you there, CPAC Texas, and it's all about being uncensored and trying to get the word out with these big events, because so many of us are being censored on all of the tech oligarchs' platforms that we really have to take these efforts out to the people. And I think that's why, if you understand CPAC, that's what Matt Schlapp and others were saying. It was great that President Trump was there, many of the top leaders around the country, Republican conservative leaders. But just to your point on Julio Rojas, I think that was probably the first time that a press person, an investigative journalist, got a standing ovation was during that presentation. So it was great because, look, I have no idea if Rojas is a conservative or not, but what's really happening is we have to now celebrate any investigative journalist, just no matter what their political persuasion is, as long as they're trying to get to the truth. Because that's really what we have. It's not that the Republican Party is that you have to be a conservative. Really, the Republican Party is the only place you can go for any type of freedom at all, including freedom of the press, because the left and the Socialist Party in this country, the Democrats, control 95% of the media. They control the big media corporations. And then when you funnel that through the big tech companies, people are just getting so much disinformation and getting lied to. It's horrible. So anyway, 100%. I know you didn't have me on to talk about that, but it really was nice to see him.
No, it's absolutely what I want to talk to you about, because I agree with you. I think the American public is frustrated. I talk to people, they're angry. They don't trust the media. So just the fact that Julio got a standing ovation, or that people will come up and say, thank you so much, Sarah, for exposing what's happening on the border on, Sean Hannity's show, or coming up to you. And I saw so many people that wanted to just shake your hand at CPAC and just get a chance to talk to you, because they knew that you were one of the few lawmakers, senior lawmakers, that put everything on the line to get to the truth during the Russia hoax. And now what we're seeing, and I'm going to play a clip, and I don't know if you're going to be able to talk about this, Congressman, because I know that, I explained to everyone that you've got to keep Shifty Schiff in check, and that your job is to take care of, investigating these intelligence issues and having oversight over them. But I want you to hear this clip. This is the second clip I'm going to play on the podcast right now from Tucker Carlson, and it's about the NSA leaking his emails to the public. He talks about identity was revealed, and he talks about how this was illegal and we have laws in place to stop this, but obviously that didn't work. Listen to this.
Even now, some in the media are claiming that we deserve this. Emailing with people who know Putin, are you? Of course the NSA is watching you. That's what you get. But that's hardly the point. By law, the NSA is required to keep secret the identities of American citizens who've been caught up in its vast domestic spying operations. So by law, I should have been identified internally merely as a U.S. journalist or American journalist. That's the law. But that's not how I was identified. I was identified by name. I was unmasked. People in the building learned who I was. And then my name and the contents of my emails left that building at the NSA and wound up with a news organization in Washington. That is illegal. In fact, it is precisely what this law was designed to prevent in the first place.
Minimization. We've talked about this before. Let's talk about it not in the context of Tucker Carlson, but in the context
sadly,
of
what is old is new again. You may remember some of this we saw back in the Obama administration during. A lot of people think it was right at the beginning of Trump. It was actually the first time we saw these types of leaks were during the Iran nuclear negotiations, when random names were getting out that appeared to be caught up in some type of intelligence product of American citizens. And it was all to go to help Obama Biden, get the Iran nuclear negotiations done with and signed in and approved. So that was the first time we had some glimpse of this. We were told at the time that that this would never happen again. They weren't sure what would happen, but people were going to pay a price. So that's what kind of led me at the time in early 2017, when we began to see the most notable one was the leak of the General Flynn phone call. Then you had President Trump talking to the Mexican president. Then you had the President Trump talking to the Australian prime minister. So all of a sudden it was like, whoa, wait a second, what the hell's going on here? And so we began to investigate that. And look, at the end of the day, I think everyone knows what we found, and that is that the Obama administrations were doing mass unmaskings, even though the Obama people had denied it. There supposedly were changes put in place. So where do we go from here? The truth is, we don't know what exactly this is. We know that Tucker Carlson has stated clearly on the record numerous times that he had emails where the content was him talking to somebody that had to do with the Russian government somehow, which, by the way, would not be unusual for journalists to reach out, through the appropriate channels to try to get interviews. So
absolutely, I've done that myself.
We haven't seen, and obviously, people that are talking to foreigners and journalists are going to get picked up in all sorts of kinds of surveillance. If that by not just Americans, it could be. I think everybody knows, if you've been around, done a lot of foreign travel like me, you always suspect that you're under surveillance. So especially if you're on the intelligence committee like me, but you don't expect American journalists or Americans to be approaching Tucker Carlson about contents of his emails. So that really is what's at play here. There could be a couple different options that could have happened. One could be something similar to what happened to General Flynn, which it appears like that was just a straight out, flat out leak. The worst of all. And I still say that was the worst leak of all time in all history, because we never, despite all the investigating we did, we never even figured out where the hell it came from. So it almost had to come from literally the people that were listening in on the call, directly to the Obama people and others, and directly to the press.
Congressman, think about and I don't know if you're in agreement with me on this or not, but we have a system in place that's supposed to punish those that leak classified information, especially when you think of private phone calls between world leaders or a general, or, these extraordinarily top secret tech cuts. And I explained that in my monologue of communications between an American citizen and a foreign adversary, maybe, and how those names are supposed to be minimized as long as no one's breaking the law. But no one has ever been charged. No one.
Well, that's why I want to.
Edward Snowden,
I want to make
Julian
sure.
Assange.
I want to differentiate. That's why I think there's two different ways to look at this. We never could figure out how the Flynn information got out, because the Flynn information, from what we could tell, never ended up in any report. So it was technically never even unmasked. And that's the crime of all of this, is that if that's the case, it never ended up in a report. That means that there only would have been a handful of people who would have had this information. And within days of that conversation taking place, it was out. But yet we were never able to find any reports where that information was in. So that's one possibility.
Incredible. That's absolutely incredible. That's saying it's weaponized.
That's a crime beyond all imagination. So let's go to unmasking, which is a little bit of a different, there's a little bit of a different nuance to this, and that is kind of to what you're referring to. That hey, Congress has passed laws. They've been very clear on the law. You have to mask U.S. persons. We went through lots of iterations of this. The original law was passed in the late 70s. It actually created the House Intelligence Committee. Then there were other laws dealing with terrorism that passed, and with the advent of the internet, a lot of different laws are in place, and that's important for everybody to understand, because everybody always says, well, you've supported these laws, and the answer is yes. I have supported these laws because we do have to track terrorists and bad guys. We have to understand which laws are actually being abused. But if you just throw everything out, guess what? You go back to what it was in the 60s and 70s, where then you turn the whole apparatus over to Biden and company. So that's the problem here. You can't just say, well, throw it out. Now, you could shut down the NSA. You could shut down the FBI. Those are things you could do to basically where there's no collection whatsoever. And look, and that's just, I understand people say, yeah, we're going to do that, but that's never going to pass. We're never going to get the votes to do that. So we have to figure out, we have to criminalize, which is what we believed we did when we caught the Obama people unmasking at will. We're supposed to have access to all of those unmaskings. So if in fact Tucker Carlson's name was unmasked, we should have access to all of that information. We've made those requests. As you know, the Republican conference has asked me to investigate this. It seems like, I'd like to get back to the days when I was just dealing with foreign threats and, looking at what's happening in Cuba, looking at what Putin's doing, looking at what the Chinese are doing. But I'm always getting rolled back into this because the Democrats in this country have weaponized over the last 5-6 years, and it really has been that long because you got to go back to the Iran nuclear deal. They've weaponized the FBI, all the intelligence agencies. It's so bad. And look, you may hear a little bit of frustration in my voice. It's just because, I didn't go to Washington to sit here and figure out who in our own government and the Democrats are using our intelligence services and military apparatuses to spy on our own citizens and play politics with it. It's sickening. I wish I didn't have to do it, but look, I understand that's a position I am in. And as you know, I'm going to get to the bottom of it. And, I'm sure that, look, they're already accusing Tucker Carlson. Anybody who talks about this as some conspiracy theory. Well, look, just show us the information. Before, that's all they got to do.
We've been through this before. Been through this before.
It's deja vu.
It is deja vu, and that's it. They're going to try to target. They're going to try to attack. They won't want anyone to investigate this. I think the frustration for a lot of Americans, though, Congressman, is the fact that once all of this is revealed, we've seen such great work done by your committee, by other journalists out there. Everyone's exposed, the Russia hoax. And then the DOJ does nothing. Where's John Durham? What happened to William Barr? President Trump made that same statement. He was saying that at CPAC. And everybody's right. What happened? No one's held accountable.
Well,
People were fired.
What you see happening, look, I'm still positive, and I guess I have to be, that people are going to go to jail and they are going to be prosecuted for the Russia grand fiasco and the Russia hoax. However, this is something totally new.
That is important. That you still believe that.
I still believe it. Look, maybe I'm a little Pollyanna, but I just have to have faith ultimately that there was a special counsel created. Durham does have the power. We're fully expecting him. It may not be as broad as we want it to be, but look, there are some major perpetrators. I think as you and everybody else know, we've made over 14 criminal referrals. That doesn't mean 14 individuals. That means 14 different criminal referrals involving multiple individuals. Now, it's really hard, and this is one of the challenges, and this was a challenge with the unmasking. So I'm going back to the unmaskings again. Mm-hmm. That was investigated. It was wrong. There were supposedly changes made. But remember, it wasn't illegal, unfortunately. Now, the Flynn stuff, totally illegal. People should be thrown in jail for that, but I'm sure the trail's gone cold, and whoever was in charge at the time killed off that investigation. In fact, the very people who leaked it could have been the people in charge of doing the investigating, which is likely what happened in the Flynn situation. But with the unmaskings, we put more checks and balances in place. So this shouldn't be very difficult. So if Tucker Carlson is there, and if this was released somehow, and if this was unmasked, we should be getting it shortly. So if I don't get it by next week, then we'll have an additional problem with General Nakasone, who's the head of the NSA, who already has a whole host of problems, being completely politically corrupted. And he's a very bad apple to go along with all the other bad apples. But the bottom line here is that there's mass corrosion of nearly every institution in this country right now. I mean, unless you happen to be in a red state where they're upholding the institutions, but I'm in California, so we've seen the degradation of institutions here in the state of California, and now we're seeing the complete degradation of everything from the Department of Justice to the military to critical race theory, on and on and on. Surrounding the Capitol with fencing, imprisoning people for I don't know. There's supposedly the January 6th deal. You're seeing political prisoners being taken. So look, we're all in the trenches. We're all sitting here fighting, and we're going to try to get to the truth, and we're going to continue to work. And we just got to get up every day and fight it.
You've given me hope right now, and you also broke news right now. I mean, this is big news. Are you expecting something next week, possibly? And what you're saying about the NSA, I couldn't be in agreement with you more. I totally agree with you on this. I look at Cuba, Congressman Nunes, and I remember, and I was saying on Sean's show last night that I remember when my mother fled Cuba, she said, with her family, and she was in her 20s, and she came in the late 1960s, and she, had nothing with her. And the reason they fled was because in the blink of an eye, she said her nation went from a free country somewhere along the road of all this craziness, the media jumping on board with Castro regime and everything. And then all of a sudden they woke up one morning and everything was gone. Yeah. Everything they knew was gone. My mom was in prison. The Bay of Pigs, fell apart. There was no hope anymore, and people didn't know what to do. I don't want that to happen to our country.
Well, and look, you have to remember that
John Durham's doing his job.
Yeah, so I do believe Durham, well, at least he has the power and he shouldn't be corrupt. And if he is, it ultimately would come down to Garland, and that would be a big issue, especially if Republicans get control back of the Congress, because we have subpoena power. So that's Durham. But as to the Cuba issue specifically, Republicans have long been on the fight for freedom in Cuba, and it used to be that having communism next to our border with the neighboring country like Cuba, it wasn't tolerated, and neither party tolerated it. But over time, slowly the Castro regime was able to penetrate the Democratic Party. So you have many Democrats who have been pro the Castro regime. Many of them went over there many times that are still in Congress today and met with Castro. You had Obama that went over there like a moron and sat there eating hot dogs with the Castro brother. So this is sick. So look, this goes back to what we started in the beginning. We wouldn't be here if you had a real media in this country that were covering these issues, because I just have to believe that 70, 80, 90% of Americans would think, whoa, what's happening in Cuba, that's not okay. But it's become normalized. It's become normalized that with Obama eating a hot dog, watching a baseball game with Castro, those types of pictures, people remember that. People think, oh well, it must be
all the
okay
way back to
there.
All the way back to Barbara Walters sitting on I remember that from a year. I mean, this was decades ago, on the back of a boat with Castro, riding around Havana Harbor or something, doing an interview with him like it was no big deal. Do you think this is why? And I know you are one of the few that has challenged Twitter. You have challenged Facebook. You have challenged Google. We have seen not only our mainstream, what we call our mainstream media, turn so far to the left that they're unrecognizable. And, they don't even seek the truth half the time anymore. They don't mind spreading disinformation for their allies in the government, which is so fascist to me. But we see, the same thing happening with social media. And I want to play this clip. This is President Trump on his lawsuit against big tech, and then I want to get your thoughts on it.
In conjunction with the America First Policy Institute, I'm filing as the lead class representative a major class action lawsuit against the big tech giants, including Facebook, Google, and Twitter, as well as their CEOs, Mark Zuckerberg, Sundar Pichai, and Jack Dorsey. 3 real nice guys.
Don't worry, I can't say his name either. Sundar Pichai. I had a hard time with that. He's like, Sundar Pichai. I'm going with that one. I'm going with Pichai. Who cares? You know, this guy is invading our privacy. He's stifling our ability to even have a normalcy on the internet. Our First Amendment rights are being just completely squashed. It's like they've monopolized information globally. And I don't know if I know most of the people that are conservative feel that way, but imagine if this was the other way around. Imagine if we would have done this 2 other ideas.
Yeah, I would just say, and I mentioned at the beginning, the outset of the podcast here, and I actually wrote about it in my book behind me before the last election.
Countdown.
That what was happening is I looked at the big tech oligarchs as a disinformation funnel. So you plug in, all the media, and the good part is that we don't have very many people that actually do investigative reporting, but the ones that we do have really kick ass. They really do a good job, like Julio Rojas getting a standing ovation at CPAC the other day. So we're fine. 95 to 3, I'll take, right? It's probably 2% are actually independent, 3% tend to be conservative journalists. I'll take that because they suck. They don't know the truth. So the 95% of them suck. American people don't even watch any of this stuff anymore. That's why you see such a high polling now that are against the media. But the problem is, and what I wrote about in my book, it's the tech companies, how they're funneling everything down. And look, when I wrote that, you got to remember that was well before all of this stuff happened, with the president of the United States and many, many others being, completely kicked off. Look, I was shadow banned. So, I was taking them to court. I was trying to point this out. It's very frustrating. It takes a lot of time, a lot of effort to try to go after these guys. But even I didn't know they were going to go so damn nuts. And so that's, right. But look, in a way, I'm glad they did. We just have to make sure that we are reaching out to Americans all over the country and people all over the world to point out just how bad these tech oligarchs are. And then we have to prop up these companies that are allowing free speech, like Rumble. So I'm putting my podcast now, all of my press hits, they all go on Rumble. It's working great. I don't, you go to YouTube, you can't even find me unless you want to find all the nasty stuff and fake news on me. The same thing, Parler is now. Me too.
Everybody, Rumble. It's so great. You're right.
And Parler is back up. Look, these are very infant companies. Finally, Parler is back up. I would have never thought that Parler was going to get completely nuked by Amazon and all the other companies. They're back up. They've had to rebuild from scratch, essentially. So that's all a good thing. That's happening now. These lawsuits that the Trump administration are bringing, those are definitely a necessity. And I just hope that we get some judges who will actually take these companies on. I think that the lawsuit seems to me to be the right direction because it's a real question, and it should at least get to discovery. Who was communicating with who with all these big tech companies when it came to attacking conservatives, to taking down Parler? I mean, we have actual emails from within the state of California where they were taking this information to Twitter. There were emails going from the state of California asking certain conservatives to be taken down. I mean, look, that there it is. I mean, that's the evidence that you need. So, and that's really the key. I mean, with the lawsuits that I've been bringing, the key has been when you get to discovery, you begin to learn things. And what happens is a lot of these judges don't want to allow discovery. My guess is because they don't want to be attacked by the fake news. And so, it's really tough. A lot of them are very liberal. But don't you find that kind of interesting? Because you would think after all the news, all the which is fake news that's been written about me over the last 5 years, why would these companies? I mean, they should have a field day getting me into discovery. But yet, they don't want to meet me in discovery. Why is that? And I think that's all you need to know. So judges that are killing these cases from getting to discovery, because discovery is where you're going to get the information, you're going to get the facts that will then lead you to a jury. And that's what I hope happens here. And we'll see, how it falls with the federal court. I guess it's going to be in Florida.
I'm going to join. I have had those same horrible experiences with Google as well as Twitter and Facebook. I can't thank you enough, Congressman. I know that you're running off to do another interview right now, and I don't want to keep you anymore. But I do want to say that this is a fight worth fighting, folks. I mean, we can't do it alone. Every single one of us needs to speak up and speak out, just like the Congressman. You were vindicated. I want people to understand that it's not easy. I mean, it wasn't easy on you. It wasn't easy on me. It isn't easy on anyone trying to tell the truth, right? I mean,
Yeah,
we just got to get out there and do it.
We're still standing, and just think about it. It's forced people like you, like me, to create podcasts. We're reaching so many people. We had a Freedom Festival out here where we had 2,000 people in California. We've now been in North Carolina. We're going to be in Indiana in a couple of weeks where we're filling up these movie theaters where people are coming in and they're listening to this. And then I put that out on a podcast and then we spread it around. So yeah, hopefully Parler gets back up, but thank God we have Rumble. So ultimately it's going to be step by step, little step by little step, working with these emerging tech companies. And we're not going to need all these companies. And look, if you're using Google, too bad for you because they're stealing all your information. And of course, you've got the Facebook problem with giving $350 million to influence elections. I'd say that's a pretty big deal that needs to be investigated.
That's right. So we have our hands full. We have to build an army of information out there. And we really have to, in a good way, you doing things the right way, but really getting out there and speaking up and stop being the silent majority. Listen to the congressman. He knows what he's talking about. He's up against Schiff every single day when he's on Capitol Hill. That's what we need to do. We need to do our job. Thank you so much, Congressman, for having me. I mean, for coming on my show today. I guess you didn't have, I am not on your show. You're on my show today, but I will be on a show again soon. I hope.
Yeah, I got to get you back on. Last time you were down at the border, so we got to get you back on. Maybe from Cuba.
Yeah, I would really like that. That would be great. You'd probably have to bust me out of jail though, right?
Well, that's probably true. I don't think Biden would. You'd probably have to call the Canadians or the Mexican government to get you out.
I think so too. Biden would probably ask them to put me in jail. That's probably what would happen. Don't give him any ideas. Okay. I'll see you. Have a great day, Congressman.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
All right. This is going to make you all laugh. It's kind of like when you're on a phone call, right? And you don't realize that the other person is like been dropped off the line. I just did my entire close of this podcast by myself. Like I was literally talking to myself and nobody could reach me. I was ignoring my phone because I didn't want it to interrupt the podcast. How crazy is that? I want to tell you, first of all, and I think this is what I said in the practice run, that Congressman Nunes has given me hope. That I have hope now that something will be done. I know it's hard for us. I know it's hard for you. I run into you at airports, in restaurants, on the streets. And when you recognize me, which sometimes happens, you say to me, you're so upset. There was no justice. How do we trust our nation anymore? How do we trust our Justice Department? And I'm going to tell you this. I have for years known Congressman Nunes and how he has fought for our nation. I believe and I have hope that something will be done. Now, if it doesn't happen, guys, I don't know. All I can tell you is that as Americans, we cannot be afraid to speak up. We need to stand up. We need to say no more from our government. We're not going to accept it. We are not going to allow our agencies to be weaponized against us. And we will continue, as I sure will as a columnist and journalist, to expose those that do. Before I let you go, I had this really kind of fun, interesting moment at CPAC. And I posted a picture of me with Caitlyn Jenner. And I have hope in California because Caitlyn was making me laugh, had said something about Governor Newsom that actually caught my attention. I'm not going to say it here, but it actually made me laugh. And so I posted that on Instagram and it was so bizarre. There were these weird responses where people were so angry that I had this picture with Caitlyn Jenner, like it offended them. Now, I didn't read all of the responses, but my son called me to say like, hey, Mom, are you okay? And I was like, oh, I'm fine. I'm doing good. And he's like, well, did you see those responses when you posted the picture of Caitlyn Jenner with you? And I said, no, I don't think I'm going to look at them either because I don't really care. And my son's like, that's it. That's great, Mom, because one of the things that I have tried to do, it might be hard for some of you to understand this, is I try to be as accepting as I can be of everyone around me. As long as someone's not a criminal, they're not breaking the law, they're not putting anyone else in danger. And I'm going to tell you a little bit why, and then I'm going to wrap this up. But when my father died when I was 13 years old, and we had to come back to the United States with my mom. My uncle, Albert, I loved him so much. My uncle, Al, he was the youngest of 13 kids. My grandmother, 13 kids. She died at 102. She's amazing. This woman was incredible, right? He was gay. And Albert took over like so many responsibilities to help my mom, he and me, and he loved me like I was his own child. I mean, I dressed really great. He had great sense and style. He really did. Don't let anyone ever tell you that gay people don't. They actually really do. I think there's like a book. Albert Tico used to say, "I have a book on fashion, and I'm gonna get you going on it." But I was a much better dresser when he was around, and he was my best friend. He was my best friend. He loved me. He defended me. He stuck up for me. Whenever I needed anyone, he was always there for me. And it didn't matter to me that he was gay. It didn't matter to me uh, how he chose to, or who he chose to be with. I always loved him. I loved him so much. And it killed me. I remember, when I first found out he was HIV positive, and then eventually he died in pretty much the first or second big wave of the AIDS epidemic. How much that hurt me, inside. It like ripped at my spirit. I wanted so much to be able to help him. I used to go down to the hospital. I'd go down to USC County Medical Center, and on the AIDS ward, I would be like the renegade, right? I would be the person coming in with like the Jack Daniels and, the cigarettes and things like that. I would tell I would sneak the guys out and like wheel them out, and they would get their smoke or they would have a drink if they could. And they would just love me for it. So I was like I was very popular on that ward. Like I was popular on any ward as I was going up with, the liquor and the cigarettes. I mean, okay, granted, I know it's a hospital. I know you guys are going to get mad at me, but guess what? They were dying. And that's just life, right? Our job, my job, I hope, and the things that I learned from my uncle is to listen to people. It's to defend those who can't defend themselves, especially as a journalist, right? It's our job to kind of be the voice for the voiceless. And Caitlyn Jenner, has her own life. She's made her own decisions. And granted, when Caitlyn was Bruce Jenner, all of my sisters thought he was the hottest thing on planet Earth. Posters everywhere. Now, my uncle was that good looking, but I used to tell girls all the time, just don't even bother. Don't even go in that direction. He's not even looking at you. He's probably looking at your boyfriend, but that's okay. But so the thing is that, and I know some of you out there probably can't understand this, and I'm not asking you to. I'm not judging you. But I think we need to take a step back, and, we need to realize that people all have their own crosses to bear, and people have all gone through their own things. And I mean, Caitlyn made me laugh. I like her. She was funny. Just like every single one of us, none of us are perfect, right? But let's just treat people with dignity and respect, and just take a moment to listen to them. Sometimes they can teach us something about ourselves and teach us to be more accepting and more loving and more kind. And that's what I hope we did here on the Sara Carter Show. Not only did we break news, I gave you a little bit, maybe some background on myself that you might not have known. Look, I'm here. I read all of your emails when you put them out there on Rumble and you send them to me, or when you tweet, or when you send things on Instagram. I'm okay with it. You don't have to agree with me. You don't have to like me. We're just people, right? So don't forget, go to saracarter.com. If you do like me and you want to hear this podcast and you want to be a part of this show and you want to hear the great, huge breaking news like Devin Nunes just gave on this show, go to saracarter.com, sign up for all of the social media. Remember to sign up for my email. We will not shadow ban you. We will get those emails to you every week. You will have the information in your hands, in your email box. And I promise not to overwhelm you with emails either. I remember that. I tell my IT guys that all the time. Don't send too many. And remember, it's here at the Sara Carter Show, where we are taking the story back. God bless you, and God bless America.
Today, I'm joined by Rebecca Weber, the CEO of the Association for Mature American Citizens. It's also known as AMAC. Can you share a little bit with the audience about your father, Dan Weber, and how he founded AMAC and why?
My father formed AMAC after he recognized that the AARP really was not representing his values, and those values were really faith, family, and freedom. And my father believed in America's greatness. He believed that there was what he described as a cultural shift occurring in our country. He thought that the very, very foundation, the Constitution, was being disregarded. And we saw that the power of government was growing and individual freedoms were diminishing, were being threatened. And to get more specific was in 2006 when he said to me that he was canceling his AARP membership. And I said to my father, why would you do that? And he said, well, they've just named Harry Belafonte Man of the Year. And he went on to say that Harry Belafonte had commented to Hugo Chavez saying that George W. Bush was the greatest terrorist threat in America. And my father said something is wrong with that. So he saw the AARP make this sharp left turn. And that was when he said, let's form AMAC. And I said, let's do it.
Rebecca, thanks so much for being with me today. I'm honored to have you and AMAC as a sponsor for the Sarah Carter Show. You know, for more information, folks, visit amac.us/Carter.
Frank Ziller, I am so happy to actually meet you. Tunnel to Towers is a foundation that I am so proud being a sponsor for the Sarah Carter Show. So thank you so much. You know, when I read the spots, I'm looking at the stories of how the foundation started. I'm so moved. What was it that made you realize, you know, we've got to do something. We've got to give something back?
Well, my brother 20 years ago on September 11, 2001, when he gave his life up while saving others, you know, New York City firefighter that runs through a tunnel, the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel, with 60 pounds of gear on his back, gets through that tunnel, goes up West Street into that South Tower and goes up those stairs. And along with 343 firefighters, 60 police officers, and so many others, he gives up his life. We needed to make sure that that sacrifice and that story was not forgotten. So that's why we decided to do the foundation. He was the youngest of 7. We raised him. My parents died by the time he was 10 years old. So he has an unbelievable story of how he recovered from his own losses. And he realized that every day in life was precious, and he lived it that way. So he died the way he lived, serving others.
T2T.org. That's T2T.org. It's only $11 a month. It's up to every single one of us to do our part to help those that were willing to give everything to protect us and our families.